echoed secrets. A world where every whisper hides a truth, and every dream feels too real to fade. Step closer and listen.
The first time I heard about Marlowe's Hollow, I was 8. My grandfather used to tell me stories about that place, how an entire town had been swallowed by the river overnight. They said it was a storm, the kind that tore trees from the ground and erased names from maps. But my grandfather never believed the official story. He said, the river took what it wanted and gave back silence. Back then, I thought it was just one of his bedtime tales. But 27 years later, I found myself standing by that same riverbank and realizing something was wrong. The old bridge that once crossed the water had reappeared, half broken, half whole, stretching into the fog like a memory trying to surface. I remember checking my phone, searching for the GPS marker. There was no road leading to where I stood. No signal either. Just the sound of water, steady, slow, and too quiet. It started as a feeling, not a voice, not a dream, just a strange pull, like something unfinished was waiting for me here. When I stepped closer, the fog thickened. It wasn't cold exactly, but it carried the scent of rain and old wood, the kind of smell that makes you remember places you've never been. On the other side of the river, faint outlines began to appear. Rooftops, chimneys, the shape of a church steeple. I froze, because Marlowe's Hollow was supposed to be 50 feet underwater. And yet, I could see it. The bells of the church tower were silent, but I could feel their echo, deep and hollow, as if sound itself was waiting for permission to exist.
Each step onto that bridge felt like walking through time. The wooden planks creaked, not with decay, but with memory. Halfway across, I noticed something strange. The air changed. The sound of the river faded behind me. No wind, no birds, just the soft rhythm of my own footsteps. And then I reached the other side. The town lay before me. At first, it looked abandoned. Windows shuttered, doors half open, but everything felt too intact. Street lamps stood upright. There were mailboxes, even a bicycle leaning against a fence. Not rusted, not new, just paused. It was like someone had pressed pause on life and left it that way for decades. I whispered, "Hello?" The sound came back to me softer, slower, as if the fog itself repeated my words, not to echo them, but to understand them. I walked past a diner, its sign faintly glowing. Harper's Grill. Inside, tables were still set, a coffee cup on the counter, steam rising from it, faint, but real. I touched it. It was warm. My heart skipped a beat. "Is anyone here?" I called out again. Nothing. Only the soft hum of a jukebox that wasn't plugged in, playing a song too old to recognize. That's when I saw her. A girl, maybe 16, standing behind a window across the street. She wasn't moving, just watching. Her hair was wet, not dripping, but glistening, like she had just walked through rain. When I blinked, she was gone. I walked over to that house. The door creaked open, like it had been waiting for me. Inside, there were family photos on the wall, smiling faces frozen in time. But every eye in every photo seemed to look slightly off to the side,
as if staring at something just outside the frame. In the living room, an old clock sat on the mantel. The hands read 2:17. I listened. It was still ticking. Tick, tick, tick. But when I looked at my phone, it showed 2:17 too, and the seconds weren't moving. I tried to change apps, refresh the screen, nothing. The clock kept ticking. My phone stayed still. It felt like I had stepped out of time, into a place where it simply waited. Then I heard it, a whisper, soft and close.
"You shouldn't have come back." I froze. The voice wasn't angry. It sounded sad. I turned slowly. The hallway was empty, but the air felt alive, as if the town itself had exhaled. It hit me then. Marlowe's hollow didn't drown. It was hidden. Something or someone had folded it away, like a secret kept too long. And now, for reasons I didn't understand, it was unfolding again, and I was standing in the middle of it. The town looked silent, like it had been waiting for me. No sound of crickets, no wind, only the soft drip of water from roofs that shouldn't exist anymore. As I walked down what used to be Main Street, I noticed something strange. The water beneath my shoes wasn't deep. It shimmered like glass, like light pretending to be liquid. I knelt down. Beneath the surface, faint words seemed to ripple in the reflection. Not carved, not written, but appearing. They spelled my name. Then, slowly, they rearranged themselves, forming a sentence. "You came back." I froze. My heart wasn't racing, but it felt heavy, as if each beat carried a memory I'd forgotten. The air smelled of old rain, the kind that comes before a storm, but never falls. I kept walking, drawn by something invisible, like a whisper in the back of my head, leading me toward the center of town. That's when I saw them. Letters floating in the shallow water, paper impossibly dry, each sealed with a red wax mark that looked half-melted. I picked one up. The seal broke with a soft sigh. Inside, there was only one line. "Do you still remember the light in the tower?" I looked up. At the far end of the flooded road stood the old lighthouse. But it never was part of this town. It belonged to the coast miles away. Yet, here it was, silent and whole. And somewhere deep inside, I realized I did remember that light. I just couldn't remember why. There was another letter floating nearby. This one was addressed not to me, but to the one who never left. My fingers trembled slightly as I opened it. The handwriting was familiar. Soft curves, uneven strokes, my mother's handwriting. If you ever walk through again, don't follow the light. The water doesn't remember, but it repeats. I felt the world tilt. The reflection in the water rippled again.
And for just a second, the town looked empty, dark, and submerged, as if I were standing at the bottom of a lake, looking up through years of silence.
The tower stood at the edge of the horizon, its pale light flickering through the mist like a heartbeat, faint, slow, dying. I didn't remember when it stopped shining. Maybe it never did. Maybe it was me who forgot how to look for it. The air grew colder the closer I walked. The silence felt thicker here. Not peaceful, not empty, just listening. Each step echoed through the water as if the town itself was breathing beneath me. The streets were gone now, replaced by rippling paths of reflected light. I could almost hear a whisper carried by the wind. It wasn't words, not yet, just a rhythm, a pulse, the sound of something trying to remember how to speak. When I reached the base of the tower, I saw something strange. The door was already open. It moved slightly with the wind, creaking softly, like it had been waiting for this exact moment, for me. Inside, the air smelled of damp stone and rust. The staircase spiraled upward, disappearing into darkness. I hesitated for a moment. Every story I'd ever heard about this place said the tower had collapsed a century ago, swallowed by the flood. But here it was, untouched. The first step I took echoed too long, like sound didn't know when to stop. My hand brushed against the wall as I climbed. The stones were warm. Not just warm, pulsing. Halfway up, I noticed faint marks on the wall. Handprints. Not painted, not carved, pressed into the surface, as if someone had been trying to climb out, not up. I reached the top. The room was small and round, filled with the faint hum of electricity. The glass windows were intact, though streaked with what looked like salt, ocean salt. There was a lantern in the middle, glowing with a weak blue light. Not flame, not bulb, something between them, something alive.
When I stepped closer, the light reacted. It brightened for a moment, then pulsed in rhythm with my breathing. I felt it move beneath my skin, like it recognized me. And then a voice, not loud, but close. "You came back too soon." I turned, but no one was there. Just shadows and the faint outline of my reflection in the glass. But it wasn't really me. The face staring back looked tired, older, soaked in water that wasn't there. The light flickered again. The hum deepened, vibrating through the floor. "You never left," the voice whispered. "You only forgot." Something inside me cracked open. Not fear, not shock, just the realization that everything around me felt familiar. The streets, the letters, the reflection, it was all me. I stepped back toward the window. Outside, the town was gone again, just water stretching endlessly under a dim blue sky. The tower was floating now, alone in silence. The light pulsed one last time, then dimmed completely. I waited, hoping it would return. It didn't. But in the glass, I saw something else. A faint shimmer in the distance, like another town, another reflection, waiting to surface. And in that reflection, someone was walking. Someone who looked exactly like me. The tower groaned softly, like exhaling after a long dream. Then, everything went quiet. I closed my eyes, listening. There was no sound of water anymore. Only the heartbeat of light, slow, fading, endless. Then I whispered, "I remember now." And the tower, for just one breath, began to glow again.
The light returned, faint, trembling, like a candle caught in wind. I stood still, afraid to breathe too loudly. The tower's walls shimmered, rippling as if the stones themselves were remembering how to exist. Outside, the endless water had changed. It wasn't dark anymore. Beneath the surface, I could see outlines, rooftops, windows, streets, a whole town asleep under a thin sheet of silver light. And then I saw her. She was standing where the clock tower used to be, her figure blurred by the shifting water. I couldn't see her face clearly, but something about her posture felt familiar. The tilt of the head, the way her hand brushed the air like she was searching for something. I whispered, "Who are you?" And in the glass, the reflection moved. Not in sync, not as a mirror. She raised her hand a moment after I did, her timing slightly delayed. But then she smiled, faintly, like a memory surfacing after years of silence. Her lips moved. I couldn't hear, but I could read them. "You left me." I stepped closer to the window. "I didn't. I came back." She shook her head slowly. "You never come back. You only remember." The tower trembled, dust falling from the ceiling. The water outside began to rise again, rippling against invisible walls. The light around the lantern pulsed, then split. One beam toward me, one toward her reflection. For a moment, the two lights met, and the world froze. The air thickened with warmth and sorrow. Images began to form in my mind. The flood, the screams, the tower sinking beneath waves that glowed like molten glass. I saw her reaching out as the water rose, and me running, terrified, promising to return when it was safe. But I never did. I pressed my hand against the glass. The reflection did the same. For a second, I felt warmth, real, human warmth, like the glass wasn't there at all. Then she spoke again. Her voice was softer this time. "The town remembers everything it loses." I felt tears burning behind my eyes. "Then why did it call me back?"
So it wouldn't have to be alone. The light began to fade. The water swallowed the streets again, quietly, like closing eyes after a long night. The reflection smiled once more and whispered, "Now rest." The glass went dark. The tower's hum stopped. I sank to the floor, still facing the window, watching as the blue glow dissolved into black. The silence wasn't heavy this time. It was peaceful, like the world had finally exhaled. Somewhere far below, I heard the water settle. The tower wasn't floating anymore. It was sinking, slowly, gently, like returning home. As the last bit of light disappeared, I whispered to the dark, "If remembering is all I can do, then I'll remember for both of us." And the silence answered, not in words, but in warmth. The wind outside the tower had stopped. Only silence remained, thick, heavy, like the air itself was waiting. He stood before the reflection, watching it shimmer in the half-light. The lantern's glow painted the walls with liquid gold, yet the mirror rippled faintly, as if the glass were breathing. He whispered, almost afraid of his own voice, "Who are you?" For a moment, nothing. Only the low hum of the water somewhere far below the tower. Then, faintly, like an echo carried through time, came a reply. "You remember me, don't you?" The reflection's lips didn't move, yet the voice filled the room. Soft, familiar, a sound from a life he thought had drowned with the town. His chest tightened. That can't be. He stepped closer, and the lantern flame flickered violently, casting brief shadows that danced across the old bricks like ghostly waves. The reflection began to shift, its outline blurred, features forming and unforming, until a faint silhouette appeared behind it. A woman's face, calm eyes, a small, sorrowful smile. "You left before the storm, didn't you?" I waited. The words slid through the air like distant music, each one pulling him back into memories he had tried to bury. The night of the flood, the rising water, the unanswered calls, the road that disappeared beneath the waves. He could smell the rain again, sharp, metallic, mixed with the faint scent of lilies. She used to keep lilies by the window. He reached out. The mirror's surface rippled beneath his fingers, cold and alive. For a moment, he felt her touch, light as mist, gone too soon. He whispered, "I tried to come back." The reflection tilted its head. "You never really left." He froze. The light dimmed again. The lantern flame struggled, and through the darkness he saw something behind the reflection. Movement. Figures. Many of them. Standing in the dark beneath the shimmering water's illusion. They looked peaceful, still, waiting. He blinked, heart pounding softly yet steadily. Were they the townspeople, or just memories pretending to be real? The reflection spoke again, voice now lower, deeper, echoing as if underwater. The town remembers every story, every promise, every name.
The light in the tower began to pulse, as though the lantern itself was syncing with his heartbeat. The air shimmered faintly, and for the briefest second he thought he saw the walls around him drip, as if the tower was underwater once again. He backed away slowly. "Why are you showing me this?" The reflection smiled faintly. "Because you came back when no one else did, and the town doesn't forget kindness." The voice lingered as the lantern dimmed further until only a soft blue glow remained. Outside, a faint sound began to rise. Not rain, not wind. Something else. Something vast. The sound of waves gently touching the stones of a city that shouldn't exist. He turned toward the doorway. Somewhere in the distance, beyond the flooded horizon, a bell began to ring. Slow, measured, like it was calling someone home. He took a breath, gripped the lantern, and stepped back into the mist. The tower vanished behind him.
The mist had thickened outside, curling around him like quiet breath. Every step down the cobblestone path sounded hollow, as if the ground beneath remembered the flood more than his footsteps. He followed the faint sound of the bell. It was strange, distant, yet so clear, as though it came from both nowhere and everywhere. He walked past houses half buried in fog, their windows reflecting only the lantern's glow. No faces, no movement, yet somehow he could feel eyes watching. At the end of the path stood a small wooden bridge. It looked new, too new for a town that had supposedly drowned 100 years ago. He hesitated before crossing, his lantern flickering as if warning him to stop. But curiosity always whispers louder than caution.
As he stepped onto the bridge, the air grew warmer. The fog shifted, and through it, he saw something on the other side. A single house, still standing. Light spilled softly from one window. Inside, a shadow moved.
He approached slowly, pushing the door open with a gentle creak. The air inside was dry, untouched by time. A kettle sat on the stove, long cold. Books lined the walls, their pages curled at the edges, and on the table, a journal lay open. The cover was faded blue, the name etched faintly on the corner, Ilara. His heart paused. That name, it belonged to her. He sat down, hands trembling slightly, and touched the pages. The ink hadn't faded. Each line written in neat, flowing handwriting, letters full of patience and memory. The water came at night. They said it would take everything, but the town had already been taken long before, by forgetting. He turned the page slowly. If anyone ever finds this, tell him the storm never ended. It only waited for his return.
The words blurred. He swallowed hard, the air in the room feeling heavier now. He could hear the faint ticking of an unseen clock, steady, rhythmic, like a heartbeat beneath the floor. Then he noticed it, a wet footprint on the wooden floor beside the chair, small, bare, leading toward the back of the house. He stood, lifted the lantern higher, and followed the prints. They led him through a narrow hallway, past walls lined with framed sketches of the town. The same streets, the same houses, all drawn from memory. One picture caught his eye, the bell tower. In the drawing, it wasn't empty. There were figures inside, holding lanterns like his, and in the corner of the drawing, written faintly, "They'll guide him when he's ready." A chill passed through him. He turned around, and for a moment, he thought he saw a shadow move past the doorway behind him, soft, silent, almost curious. He whispered into the quiet, "Ilara?"
The answer came not in words, but in the soft rustle of pages behind him. The journal turning itself to another entry. He stepped closer and read, "If you're reading this, it means the tide has shifted. You'll see the lights soon. Follow them. But remember, not everything that returns should be found." The lantern flickered once more, and the window beside him began to mist over from the inside. He moved closer. Outside, the fog had thickened to a silver wall.
And within it, faintly, he saw glowing shapes, lanterns, dozens of them, each one floating just above the waterline as if held by unseen hands. The bell rang again, once, twice, slower now. He turned toward the door. The journal lay open behind him, a final line still forming, fresh ink spreading across the page, though no one held the pen. He's here. He froze. The air felt alive again. The house creaked softly, like it had just taken a breath. And from somewhere deep within the fog outside, a voice whispered through the sound of the waves, "Welcome back."
He stepped outside, the journal still open in his hand. The mist swirled around him like a living thing, parting just enough to reveal the lights. Lanterns, hundreds of them, suspended in the air above the dark water. They pulsed faintly, as if breathing in rhythm. He took a cautious step toward the edge of the path. The cobblestones ended abruptly, and beyond them was only the glimmer of wet reflection. Yet somehow, the first lantern hovered close enough to touch. He reached out. It didn't burn. It was warm, gentle, almost comforting, like holding a memory that refused to fade. Then another lantern drifted closer, and another, forming a narrow trail that curved away through the fog, disappearing into the endless gray. A quiet voice within him whispered, "Follow them." So he did. He walked carefully, the sound of his footsteps swallowed by the mist and the faint ripple of water. Each lantern glowed brighter as he passed, their light revealing glimpses beneath the surface. Stone walls, arches, fragments of buildings. The town that shouldn't exist, still there beneath the waves. He slowed, staring down. The outlines of rooftops shimmered below, and faintly he could see shapes moving. Not fish, not shadows, but people. They walked calmly, their faces serene, their eyes closed, as though dreaming in another world. The fog whispered around him. He couldn't tell if it was wind or voices. "They stayed," one whisper said. "They remembered," said another. He stopped at the next lantern. Something glimmered beside it, a small object floating in the water. He crouched down and lifted it out. It was a key. Old, corroded, heavy with age. The handle shaped like the bell tower's spire. He turned it over in his hand, and a sudden pulse of warmth spread through his palm. Not pain, but recognition. The sound of the bell echoed again, closer this time, clearer. It wasn't calling him away, it was guiding him deeper. He followed the lanterns again. The fog grew thinner, and soon he saw the faint outline of a gate rising from the water. Twisted metal, half rusted, yet somehow standing tall. The key shimmered faintly in his grip. He stepped forward, feeling the air around him grow still. And when he placed the key into the lock, the gate opened without resistance, not creaking, not grinding, just a soft sound, like the sigh of the tide. Beyond the gate, the lanterns formed a circle, a gathering of light around what looked like the remains of a courtyard. And at its center stood something strange, a statue, half buried in wire. He waded closer, the cool waves brushing against his knees, the lantern light shimmering around him like a halo. The statue was of a woman, her hands lifted toward the sky, her face serene, peaceful, eternal. He didn't need to read the name at the base. He already knew. Ilara. The light around her rippled, and for a moment, it felt like the whole town breathed again. He looked up, and there, through the fog, he saw faint silhouettes watching him from the distance. Dozens of them, lanterns in their hands. None moved. They only watched, waiting. And then he heard it again, the same voice that had whispered in the tower. "You found the way back." He turned slowly, but there was no one there, only the lanterns swaying gently above the silent water. He whispered into the quiet, "What do you want from me?" The answer came from everywhere at once, from the fog, from the water, from the heartbeat of the drowned town itself. To remember. The lanterns dimmed, one by one, until only the statue's soft glow remained. The mist began to rise higher, and he felt the air grow heavy again, as though the town was preparing to vanish once more. He stepped closer to the statue, placed his hand on the cold stone, and for a heartbeat, it felt warm. "You're not done yet," the voice whispered, fading like the last echo of a dream. The light flickered, and then silence.
He stood motionless beside the statue. The fog pressed in like a heartbeat, slow, rhythmic, alive. The lanterns had dimmed, but their glow still lingered beneath the surface, as if the town itself refused to fade. He stared into the dark water, and then he saw it, a reflection that wasn't his. A young boy, barefoot, laughing, running across a street lined with cobblestones and small shops. Behind him, a woman's voice, gentle and warm, calling his name. The reflection rippled. He blinked, and it was gone. But the ache in his chest wasn't. He turned back toward the statue. The name Ilara seemed to shimmer faintly, and with every passing second, the pieces began to form. Not in his mind, but in his memory. He knew this place, not as a story, not as a legend, but as home. The realization came softly, not as shock, but as recognition, like meeting someone you loved in another life. He whispered to the statue, "Why did you call me back?" The fog swirled again, and in that quiet, the voice returned, faint, echoing, as though carried from the bottom of the sea. "Because you left before remembering." He took a deep breath, his reflection trembling in the shifting light. Images began to surface in his mind. A small house by the shore, a woman standing at the window as the tide rose, a boy clutching her hand, the bell tolling from the tower as the first waves broke over the street. He remembered running, he remembered turning back, and he remembered the moment he let go. The air grew colder, the fog thickened around him like smoke. He felt the ground beneath him tremble, and suddenly the faint outlines of buildings began to rise through the mist, walls shimmering with translucent water, streets reforming, the drowned town coming alive again, one breath at a time. The townspeople appeared, not ghosts, not illusions, but soft figures made of light and memory. They moved gracefully, wordlessly, their eyes turned toward him as though they recognized him too. He stepped back, the weight of everything pressed down on his chest, the guilt, the grief, the years of forgetting. One of the lanterns drifted close, and within its glow he saw the boy again, younger, brighter, holding the same journal that now trembled in his hands. The boy smiled, and in his small voice he said, "You promised you'd come back." Tears welled in his eyes before he could stop them. He tried to speak, but his throat felt heavy, his voice breaking. "I didn't know. I didn't remember." The boy stepped closer, still smiling. "Then remember now." The lanterns flared, all at once, lighting up the entire courtyard in a gentle golden wave. He fell to his knees, clutching the journal to his chest, the sound of the bell echoing through the air. But this time, it wasn't mournful, it was peaceful. And for the first time, he understood. The town hadn't called him to haunt him. It had called him to finish the story he had left behind, to remember what it meant to love and to lose, and still find peace in the remembering. As he looked up again, the boy was gone. So were the townspeople. Only the statue of Ilara remained, and beneath it, the faint shimmer of the water rippling gently, as if whispering thank you. He stood, the mist parting softly around him. Somewhere far away, dawn was beginning to break. The air was still. The fog began to thin, unraveling like silk, and for the first time he could see the horizon. The drowned town stretched before him, streets that shimmered like glass, houses standing half-formed in the soft light. Every sound, the bell,
The footsteps, even the wind, had grown distant, fading like a memory slipping away. He stood in the center of the square, the journal pressed against his chest. The pages fluttered softly, though there was no wind. It was as if the words inside were breathing, alive, waiting. He looked down at them. The ink had changed again. Where once there were broken sentences, now the pages told a complete story, his story. Every moment he had forgotten, every promise left unfinished, had written itself back into the book. He turned a page and read. He left when the tide rose, but the sea never forgot his footsteps. He closed the book gently. The weight of it felt different now, lighter, as though it had finally been unburdened. Behind him, a faint hum rose, not eerie, but warm, like a lullaby sung from another world. He turned. The lanterns were rising, slowly drifting upward, one by one, into the pale morning light. Each carried a small reflection, faces of those who once lived here, smiling as if they were finally ready to rest. He watched them go, a strange peace settling in his heart. He knew now what the town had wanted, not to haunt, but to be remembered. A voice spoke again, soft and distant, the same voice he'd heard through the fog before. It came from behind the statue. "You can stay if you wish." He turned slowly. There she was, Ilara, not stone, not shadow, but real, standing beneath the fading mist. Her hair floated gently, as if touched by the wind that didn't exist. Her eyes glowed faintly, kind and knowing. "You remember me," she said, smiling faintly. He nodded, his voice trembling. "Yes, I do now." She stepped closer, her presence calm and weightless. "The town was never lost," she whispered. "It was waiting for you to find it." He felt the truth of it deep within him. This place had never been about loss or ghosts. It had been about memory, about love that refused to sink beneath time. But as she spoke, the horizon brightened, and he saw the first rays of sunlight spill across the distant water. The light cut through the fog like a blade, and he realized the world outside was returning. He looked around. The houses were fading, their outlines breaking into ripples of golden light. The air shimmered with the sound of the sea, returning to claim what was once its own. Ilara looked at him softly. "If you stay," she said, "you'll never wake again." He glanced down at the journal. Its pages glowed faintly, the ink beginning to blur, as if the story itself was dissolving back into the tide. He whispered, "If I go, will I forget again?" Ilara smiled sadly. "No, not this time." Her form began to fade, the mist swirling around her like a gentle tide pulling her away. "You carried the story back," she said. "That was all we ever needed." He wanted to speak, to reach for her, but his hand passed through nothing but light. And then, silence. The town was vanishing. The bell tolled one last time, soft and low, echoing through the empty air. He closed his eyes, feeling both the sadness and serenity of goodbye. When he opened them again, he was standing knee-deep in calm, still water. The fog had cleared completely. The horizon stretched endless and golden, the morning sun painting the sea in soft amber light. In his hand, the journal, but it was empty again. Only one line remained, etched faintly on the last page. "Every tide returns what it loves." He smiled, quietly, almost to himself, and began walking toward the distant shore. The shore was quiet, only the whisper of waves breaking gently against the rocks. He stood still, shoes soaked, journal pressed to his chest, watching as the last of the mist melted into sunlight. It felt strange to breathe the morning air again, the scent of salt and earth, the low cry of a gull overhead. Everything seemed too real, and yet part of him wasn't sure if it was real at all. He turned once more toward the horizon, the place where the town had been. Now it was nothing but water, calm and endless, its surface glinting like glass. For a long time, he simply watched. No ruins, no voices, just silence, a peaceful kind of silence, as though the world had exhaled after holding its breath for years. He opened the journal. The pages were blank again, but when the sunlight touched them, faint shapes shimmered across the paper, like ripples forming words just beneath the surface. He traced them with his fingers, but before he could read anything, they vanished. He smiled softly. "Maybe that's the point," he murmured. "Some stories aren't meant to be written. They're meant to be carried." As he walked inland, he noticed something strange. The road that led to the sea looked different. It wasn't paved anymore. Wild grass grew between the stones, and the wooden sign that once said Hollow's End was half buried in the sand. He frowned. Had it really been there before? He took a few steps forward and saw a figure standing near the bend in the road. A woman, hair pale in the sunlight, a familiar silhouette against the glow. His breath caught. Ilara? But when he blinked, she was gone. Only the wind stirred the tall grass, and the sound of the waves came softly behind him. He looked down. At his feet, something gleamed, a small brass key, weathered and cold. He bent to pick it up. Etched along its side was a single word: return. He turned it over in his palm, half smiling, half uneasy. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe not. The wind shifted again, carrying the faintest sound, like the echo of a bell far, far away. He stood there for a long time, listening. Then, slowly, he slipped the key into his pocket and began walking toward the town that still existed, the one where the living waited. Behind him, the sea shimmered. For just a heartbeat, if someone had been watching, they might have seen the reflection of lights beneath the surface. Lanterns still floating, still rising, deep beneath the calm water. He never turned around to see them. But sometimes, when the tide rose high and the night grew still, he'd swear he could hear the bell again, soft, distant, calling his name. And though he never returned to that shore, the sea, somehow, always seemed to find him.